The arena floor was stained with the blood of a dozen species, each one convinced they were the galaxy's apex predator. Commander Xerathal of the Crithian Dominion stood at the center, her forearms crossed in calculated arrogance, her exoskeleton gleaming under the harsh sodium lights. She had broken 17 challengers in the past month alone, each one a decorated warrior from their respective homeworlds. Then came the human. Darius Kane walked into the combat pit with the unhurried gait of a man checking his mail. No ceremony, no war cry, no elaborate entrance ritual like the others had performed before their swift defeats. He was lean, unremarkable by galactic standards. No natural armor, no extra limbs, no enhanced biology that made sense to the assembled crowd. Just a human in standard issue overalls, the kind worn by maintenance crews and engineers across every space station in the Outer Rim. The crowd's murmur shifted to laughter. This is the human the Coalition sends? Xerathal's voice boomed across the arena, her translator rendering her words into a dozen languages simultaneously. A slave? A tool user? She flexed her primary arms, each muscle fiber visible beneath her semi-translucent skin. I've dismantled combat mechs more threatening than this. Darius said nothing. He simply rolled his shoulders once, twice, loosening joints that had spent the last 8 hours rewiring power conduits in Section 7. His hands hung loose at his sides, calloused and scarred from years of work that the Crithian couldn't begin to comprehend. The human species, Xerathal continued, playing to the crowd, are adequate servants. Decent engineers. But warriors? She laughed, a sound like grinding metal. Your kind builds things for those strong enough to rule. Know your place, slave. The referee, a crystalline entity that processed time differently than most species, began the countdown. Xerathal dropped into a combat stance that had been perfected over 10,000 years of Crithian military evolution. Darius simply stood there, watching her with eyes that seemed far older than his 32 years suggested. The signal flared. Xerathal launched herself forward with the speed that had made her species legendary. Her kind could cross 20 meters in under a second, could strike with enough force to dent starship hulls. She had trained since childhood for this, every movement a calculated expression of dominance. She never saw Darius move. One moment he was standing in place. The next he was inside her guard, his body angled in a way that seemed to defy skeletal limitations. His left hand caught her primary right arm at the wrist. Thumb pressed into a nerve cluster that humans shouldn't have known existed. His right hand struck upward, palm flat, catching her beneath the mandible with precisely enough force to snap her head back without breaking her neck. Xerathal's secondary arms swung in, bladed edges that could slice through combat armor. Darius twisted, using her own momentum against her, redirecting the strike so that her left secondary arm struck her right with a sickening crack. Before she could process the pain, his elbow found the nerve junction at her shoulder, and her primary left arm went numb. 8 seconds had elapsed. She tried to roar, to activate the combat stimulants that Crithians used in desperate situations. But Darius was already moving, his footwork economical, precise, the kind that came from fighting in cramped starship corridors where every centimeter mattered. He swept her legs, not with brute strength but with perfect timing, his shin connecting with the back of her knee joint at the exact moment her weight shifted forward. Xerathal hit the ground hard enough to crack the reinforced floor panels. She rolled, her training screaming at her to create distance to reassess. But the human was already there, knee pressed against her thorax, hand wrapped around her throat with fingers positioned over the arterial clusters that fed her brain. Not choking her, not crushing, just holding. With the certainty of someone who knew exactly how much pressure it would take to end this, and was choosing not to. I'm not a slave, Darius said quietly, his voice barely audible over the shocked silence of the crowd. I'm a combat engineer. Do you know what that means? Xerathal's eyes widened. Combat engineer, not maintenance, not support staff, combat. She had read the designation wrong, or rather, she had read it through the lens of Crithian understanding, where engineers were a worker caste, not warriors. It means, Darius continued, that I build things under fire, that I've welded hull breaches while being shot at, that I've fought boarding parties with whatever tools were in my hand because on a human ship, everyone fights when it comes down to it. We don't have a warrior caste, Commander. We're all the warrior caste. He released her and stood, backing away with the same unhurried calm he'd entered with. 23 seconds had elapsed since the match began. Zirathal lay on the ground, 3 of her forearms useless, her pride shattered more thoroughly than her body. "Your species is strong," Darius said, loud enough for the arena to hear. "Fast. Dangerous. But you've had 10,000 years of being apex predators on your world. Humans?" He shook his head slightly. "We spent our evolution being prey. We learned to fight smarter, faster, meaner than anything that wanted to eat us. We learned that the tool user survives when the strong predator starves." He turned to walk away, then paused. "And for the record, every human you've called a slave knows 17 ways to kill you with whatever's in arm's reach. We just choose not to. That's not weakness, Commander. That's civilization." The crowd erupted, some in outrage, others in shocked appreciation. But Darius Kane, combat engineer, simply walked out of the arena and back toward Section 7, where a power conduit still needed rewiring, and his shift wasn't over for another 4 hours. Behind him, Zirathal struggled to her feet, her worldview fundamentally altered. She had learned something invaluable in those 30 seconds. Humanity's greatest weapon wasn't their technology or their numbers. It was that they had never forgotten what it meant to be the underdog, and underdogs fought to win.